And so, an interesting thing that he says here, especially for those that think that this is the beginning of Daniel's 70th week, is what he says in the part B of that verse. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Now, whenever I think of that, I'm thinking if this was the beginning of Daniel's 70th week, that would be the wrong thing to be saying. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. To me, hey, they did begin for the church way back there. And then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall carry you. And I'm thinking of the persecution that resulted in martyrdom of the early Christians, and down in verse 13, and he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. To me, whenever I get there, I see kind of a breaking point. Now, we do know at verse 15 start talking about things that relate to Daniel's 70th week. But whenever I see what it says about end there, I think about what it says in verse 30, and then shall appear the sign. They're asking, what shall be the sign of thy coming? They might as well be asking, what is going to be the sign of thy second coming or advent? Later on, as I begin to look at that more and more, oh man, Christ is going to make an appearance before Daniel's 70th week begins. Christ is going to make a sign appearance before then his second advent. What he does when he says, and then shall the end come, at the end of verse 14, he turns his attention at that point to things related to Daniel's 70th week. That would correspond. What we've read so far corresponds with what we've seen with the opening seals, and especially the sixth seal. And then he carries us throughout Daniel's 70th week. He begins, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place. All right, well, we know that points to the Antichrist, okay, spoken of by Daniel. And then he goes on to talk about how that in that time there's going to be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world. And so he goes on to say, wherefore if they shall say unto you, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. I don't know of anybody that is denying that it is of his second advent. And for wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. That parallels what he says in Revelation chapter 19, the invite to the birds to come, that great supper. Then he turns his attention in verse 29 to his sign appearance, to what parallels with the sixth seal. This is a sixth seal passage.
Those days after that tribulation, the sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give her light. Now, at this point, we could just pray and go home. This is talking about the rapture, and this says it's after the tribulation.
Verse number 29. Immediately after the tribulation. Guess what immediately after the tribulation means? Post-trib.
Now, it does say something there that I struggle with, and I've got to tell you, I didn't know how to deal with it. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, you know, that word after, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to after the tribulation back in my first exposure to that, because I thought, well, man, I've been through tribulation. It's like history. Christians throughout history have been through tribulation. What I found is on The tribulation, the word tribulation that Jesus uses there, so many are supposing that that's Daniel's 70th week. Well, whenever I began to look at that, I found some problems. One of them that was like a glaring problem in my mind is, if this is Daniel's 70th week, the celestial signs are going to happen. So I'm thinking, okay, if you believe that this is a sixth seal event, you have Daniel's 70th week being over, and the seventh seal has not even been opened yet. So, as I continue to look at this Matthew 24, 29 through 31 passage, it's just gripped me more and more that this is the time of the rapture. And what scholarship has done with that, I think they've ran from that word after for so long that they just tried to explain it away by going in directions that just will not work. It just throws everything in the Revelation in disarray. So whenever you realize that what's happening here in verse 29, this is after the church age tribulation, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the day of the Lord will begin. And it's like Peter said on the day of Pentecost, the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before that great and notable day of the Lord come. The sixth seal is a day of the Lord passage. Okay. And so when you realize that, we got to differentiate between tribulation and God's judgment. The day of the Lord is a time of God's judgment. So whenever I begin to see that, then what Jesus said in Matthew 24, 29 through 31 just smoothed out. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, which is the days that we are a part of now, shall the day of the Lord begin. Is happening when the sun is darkened and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. It's going to be a day like anything that's ever happened. If you took everything all together and compiled it, the world wars and all the wars that's ever happened and all the tornadoes that's happened all together and all the earthquakes that's happened all together, it wouldn't add up.